In the dim glow of endless corridors lined with towering filing cabinets, a quiet tyranny took hold. One not forged in fire or conquest, but in ink and stamps and endless regulations. Across centuries and continents, bureaucracies have risen like silent vines, wrapping around the arteries of empires until the pulse of progress slowed to a halt. This is the story of systems designed to govern, yet destined to paralyze. No dramatic battles or fiery revolutions marked their victory. Instead, they crept forward to forms, committees, and decrees, suffocating nations from within. The air grew thick with the scent of dust and stale paper, while leaders and citizens alike found themselves entangled in a web so intricate that movement itself became impossible. What began as an attempt at order evolved into a force of entropy, where the machinery of state turned against the very people it was meant to serve. But no one understood what was coming next, for the collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the scratching of pens and the shuffling of documents. The great empires of history often boasted of their administrative genius, building vast networks of officials to manage sprawling territories and diverse populations. In the Byzantine Empire, intricate layers of imperial bureaucracy preserved Roman law and tax systems long after the West had fallen, creating a resilient but increasingly rigid framework that dictated every aspect of trade, military service, and religious observance. Across the vast steppes and cities of the Ottoman Empire, the Devshirme system, and later Tanzimat reforms, layered bureaucratic controls over military, fiscal, and cultural life, attempting to modernize while preserving central authority. In the sprawling Soviet Union of the 20th century, the Communist Party constructed the most elaborate administrative machine the world had ever seen, with Gosplan orchestrating 5-year plans that reached into every factory, farm, and household. These systems promised efficiency and fairness, their architects envisioning a harmonious order where every detail was accounted for. Daily life hummed under their watchful gaze, farmers filled out quotas, merchants navigated tariffs, and citizens queued for permissions that governed the simplest routines. The weight of procedure felt reassuring at first, a bulwark against chaos and turbulent times. Imagine the rhythm of existence before the paralysis fully set in, the predictable cadence of bureaucratic life that shaped generations. In Soviet apartments, families rose to the sound of state radios broadcasting production targets, their mornings filled with the rustle of ration cards and work permits. Ottoman scribes in Istanbul's grand offices meticulously logged tributes from distant provinces, the scent of ink and wax seals mingling with the call to prayer echoing from minarets. Byzantine clerks in Constantinople's palaces tallied taxes from Anatolian estates, their days measured by the turning of hourglasses and the careful application of imperial seals. People adapted, learning the unspoken rules of survival, who to bribe, which form to duplicate, when to wait in endless lines. Markets operated under layers of licenses, courts moved at the pace of appeals and counter-appeals, and innovation bowed to the approval of distant committees. This was the world of managed existence, where the state's embrace felt protective, its paperwork a ritual binding society together. Yet beneath the surface of routine, invisible cracks were forming, unnoticed by those who had known nothing else. Early warning signs appeared as subtle distortions in the machinery, delays that stretched from days into weeks, decisions deferred to ever higher levels of authority. In the late Ottoman period, provincial governors found their initiatives buried under mountains of correspondence from the Sublime Porte, responses arriving months later if at all. Soviet factories reported inflated production figures to meet unrealistic targets, while central planners in Moscow remained insulated from the realities of broken machinery and exhausted workers. Byzantine tax collectors encountered growing resistance as regulations multiplied, each new decree adding complexity, without addressing underlying corruption or economic strain. Officials multiplied, creating overlapping jurisdictions that bred confusion rather than clarity. Reports piled up unread, their recommendations lost in the labyrinth of interdepartmental reviews. Citizens whispered of absurdities. A farmer denied seeds because the proper requisition had not been countersigned, or a merchant whose goods spoiled while awaiting export approval. These were not isolated failures but symptoms of a deeper malaise, where the bureaucracy's hunger for control outpaced its capacity for action. Still, the system lumbered on, its momentum masking the gathering stagnation. As tensions rose, the invisible became visible, through mounting inefficiencies that touched every corner of society. Economic pressures mounted as resources were funneled into sustaining the administrative apparatus itself. Salaries for legions of clerks, ink for endless decrees, buildings to house expanding ministries. In the Soviet Union, the nomenklatura class of privileged bureaucrats grew detached, their decisions shaped by internal politics rather than practical needs, leading to chronic shortages despite vast natural wealth. The Ottomans grappled with European competition as their cumbersome tariff systems and guild regulations hindered adaptation to industrial changes. Byzantine emperors issued reform after reform, each adding new layers of oversight that further entangled provincial administration. Public frustration simmered beneath outward compliance. Black markets flourished as official channels ground to a halt, and talented individuals fled or withdrew into apathy. Key decisions were postponed indefinitely, trapped in committees where consensus proved elusive. External threats, barbarian incursions, economic rivals, technological shifts exposed the brittleness, yet internal pressures from within the bureaucracy proved even more corrosive. The machine demanded more fuel, more personnel, more rules, devouring the vitality it was meant to direct. The critical mistakes crystallized in moments of attempted reform that only tightened the knots. Soviet leaders like Brezhnev presided over an era of stagnation where bureaucratic inertia resisted any meaningful change, fearing disruption to the delicate balance of power. Ottoman sultans pursued centralization through new ministries, inadvertently creating rival power centers that paralyzed decision-making during crises like the Balkan uprisings. In Byzantium, the theme system of military administration devolved into hereditary privileges and tax exemptions that starved the treasury. Pressures from below met resistance from above. Petitions for simplification were met with demands for more documentation. Corruption became systemic, as officials exploited the complexity for personal gain, turning public service into private enterprise. The weight of accumulated errors pressed down, misallocated funds, contradictory laws, and a growing disconnect between rulers and the ruled. By this stage, the bureaucracy no longer served the nation served the bureaucracy, its survival dependent on perpetuating the very structures that hindered it. Then came the moment the system began to fail, not with a thunderous crash, but with a series of quiet ruptures that spread like fractures through ice. In the Soviet Union, the Chernobyl disaster laid bare the consequences of layered secrecy and unresponsive hierarchies, where warnings were ignored and accountability diffused across countless desks. Ottoman finances collapsed under the burden of uncontrolled debt and inefficient tax farming as provincial revolts overwhelmed the capacity of distant administrators. Byzantine territories slipped away as imperial edicts failed to mobilize resources in time. The once mighty fleets and armies, hamstrung by supply chains, lost in paperwork. Communications slowed to a crawl, urgent directives arrived too late or not at all. Entire sectors of the economy froze, with production halted pending approvals that never materialized. The illusion of control shattered as citizens witnessed the state's inability to respond to famine, invasion, or economic shock. Fear replaced routine as the familiar corridors of power revealed their emptiness. The collapse accelerated as the bureaucracy, designed for permanence, proved incapable of adaptation when reality demanded flexibility. Human consequences unfolded in waves of hardship and disillusionment that scarred societies for generations. Families in Soviet breadlines endured hours of waiting only to find shelves empty, their faith in the system eroding with each feudal stamp on a ration card. Ottoman peasants, crushed by arbitrary taxes enforced through labyrinthine decrees, turned to banditry or migration, destabilizing the countryside. In Byzantine cities, once thriving markets grew silent as merchants abandoned enterprises strangled by regulations, leading to urban decay and social fragmentation. Trust evaporated, neighbors informed on one another to curry favor with officials, while corruption bred cynicism. Hunger, disease, and unrest followed as basic services, grain distribution, medical aid, infrastructure repair, succumbed to procedural paralysis. The human spirit, resilient yet finite, bent under the weight of absurdity, with suicides, emigration, and quiet resistance marking the personal toll. Children grew up navigating forms instead of fields, learning survival through evasion rather than contribution. The social fabric frayed, replaced by isolation and mutual suspicion. The long-term historical impact echoed far beyond the immediate falls, reshaping the trajectory of civilizations and informing future governance. The Byzantine model's administrative legacy influenced medieval Europe, even as the empire itself fragmented, demonstrating both the strengths and perils of centralized control. Ottoman bureaucratic traditions lingered in successor states, complicating modernization efforts in the Balkans and Middle East. The Soviet collapse in 1991 sent shockwaves through the world, exposing the limits of planned economies and inspiring a global reevaluation of big government. Nations learned harsh lessons. Excessive layers of administration breed inefficiency, while unchecked complexity invites corruption and stagnation. Yet the temptation to bureaucratize persists as new empires and states grapple with scale. These historical ruptures stand as cautionary monuments, their ruins whispering of the delicate balance between order and vitality. They reshaped borders, economies, and ideologies, proving that the mightiest structures can fall not to external armies, but to the slow poison of their own internal machinery. In the end, the bureaucracies that paralyzed entire nations leave us with a haunting reflection on the nature of power and human organization. What remains are not just fallen empires, but the enduring question of how societies can govern without succumbing to the very tools meant to sustain them. The silence that follows such collapses carries the weight of lost potential, generations whose energy was consumed by forms and files, dreams deferred in waiting rooms of indifferent authority. As we navigate our own age of expanding regulations and digital oversight, the ghosts of these histories urge vigilance. The process is rarely dramatic at first. It builds in meeting rooms and archives, in the quiet accumulation of rules that promise security but deliver chains. The lesson lingers like dust on forgotten ledgers. Without constant renewal and simplification, even the most sophisticated systems will eventually strangle the life they seek to protect. And in that slow suffocation lies the true terror of irreversible rupture, a warning etched not in stone, but in the fragile paper trails of human ambition.